So let's expand on the reality that Donald Trump is not the problem, but is a symptom. I've said this before, and I've never devoted a whole segment to it that I can remember. But I think it's an important time to discuss this as we're starting to ramp up in the 2020 election. And now we're getting beyond just executive orders that could be quickly reversed by the next president. We're really now at a point at which there has been irreversible harm done by the presidency of Donald Trump. When we look today at Donald Trump's presidency, and we look at the United States, and we look at our increasingly laughable role in world politics under Donald Trump, and we look at countries around the world increasingly excluding the United States from serious discussions because Donald Trump just can't be the adult in the room that our former president was, even if you disagreed with him on policy. I understand that it can get really easy and simple to just say Donald Trump is the problem. Trump is a problem, and I've told you every time that I tell you that Donald Trump has done something that's bad, there's no question that Donald Trump is a problem. With Trump, he really is, most importantly, though, the end result of the problems, not the problem in and of itself at a kind of broader systemic level. And I know that a lot of you already sort of have an idea about some of the ways in which this is true and could probably explain to me some of the ways in which Donald Trump is a symptom rather than the problem himself. But there are actually more examples than we've ever discussed. Number one, Trump partially won, partially is an important word, because of anti and pseudo-intellectualism. I've said this before. Trump didn't create an electorate that is increasingly proud of their ignorance and sees higher education as inherently left-wing nonsense and liberal indoctrination. Trump benefited from the American right pushing anti-intellectualism for decades. Trump benefited from a right-wing electorate that doesn't care about double standards and hypocrisy and immorality on the basis of their own moral code. He benefited from that, but he didn't create it. Now, I've given that example before, and it's not new. And a lot of times people will write to me, and they'll say, David, you're just saying Trump voters are stupid. It's sort of an ad hominem. It's not really an important and serious and thorough analysis of what's going on. Well, it's accurate. And that's what I care most about, even if some people don't like it. But it's just one piece. Let me give you another example of how Trump is a symptom and not the problem in and of itself. Donald Trump has weaponized xenophobic, racist, anti-immigrant, nationalist red meat, the likes of which we've been seeing him throw out to his followers since he announced his candidacy back in 2015, I guess it was. If there isn't already some of this repressed desire for Trump's rhetoric, Trump throwing that xenophobic whatever red meat out isn't going to work. It's not going to help get him elected. Donald Trump did not create racist, anti-immigrant, nationalist sympathies in the American right. What he was able to do is weaponize and coalesce lots of what was being thought by American right-wingers, but not typically said or not always said, because they sort of realize that there's a contingent of America which rightly is turned off by that type of rhetoric. Those sympathies existed before Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't create those sympathies. And if they didn't exist, Trump wouldn't have been able to take advantage of them. So this is another way in which Donald Trump is a symptom of the problem and an end result, not the problem in and of itself. But let's keep going, okay? Because very often the analyses stop here. And so far, it's just been examples of how the right has fomented the circumstances that led to Trump. And they have. But the left is not totally innocent here either. The left, as a really bad alternative to the right for a lot of the last 20 years, also enabled Donald Trump to win. I'm not blaming Democrats, okay? Understand what it is that I mean. The Democratic Party has been a slightly left of center party overall, okay? There are exceptions. Overall, for the last 2 decades or more, the Democratic Party has at the national level, by and large, been a slightly left of center party. The DNC and the Democratic Party, corporate Democrats, so to speak, have unsuccessfully tried to compromise with an American right wing that doesn't compromise. They've played the sort of milquetoast slightly to the left of Republicans' alternative for decades, with some exceptions, of course. They have mostly still been part of the neoliberal, centrist status quo force that has only recently sort of started to wake up to the reality that we've got to deal with systemic inequality. Healthcare needs to be radically changed at a systemic level. The foreign policy of the United States needs a complete and total overhaul. We need to rethink the economy. We need to rethink all sorts of stuff. So when the alternative to Republicans has been for decades mostly a Democratic Party that is basically a slightly more progressive but widely impotent alternative that apologizes for being slightly left and often runs as Republican light, that has also helped millions of voters say, let's just give Trump a shot. Okay, when both Democratic and Republican presidents for a long time haven't improved on the fundamental economic frustrations that most Americans have, other than dealing with it around the edges for the lower and middle class, of course that's going to get some people to say, what the hell, let's just try Donald Trump. Now, this is not a defense of Trump voters. This is not a defense of right-wing ideology. This is not a criticism of every individual Democrat or policy idea from the Democratic Party. What I'm pointing out is the reality that the right has done a really good job of creating the conditions in which Donald Trump could do what he did by appealing to these base, unsophisticated, anti-intellectual movements and ideas of the right. But the Democratic Party hasn't been left enough or strong enough or principled enough to be the obvious right choice to more of America over a totally ignorant clown like Trump. Now, I know a lot of you will write in and say, David, a lot of those right-wing voters are so ignorant and so ideological, and they just care about abortion, the evangelicals anyway, that it doesn't matter what the Democratic Party does. Either way, they weren't going to vote for Democrats. I agree that that applies to a lot of the Republican Party, but this election came down to 77,000 votes in 3 states. There is no way that you are going to convince me, and I don't think there is an empirical case to be made, that if the Democratic Party didn't seem like what it has been for the last several decades, that 77,000 votes wouldn't have gone a different way if it was made abundantly clear all along that this is not Republican light. It's not a slightly more pro-social version of Republicans at the national level. So Trump voting out should happen. Trump either has a year and a half left or 5.5 years left. We don't know. Eventually, Trump's going to be gone. There's going to be real damage that Donald Trump did, which the next person, whoever it is going to have to clean up. If Trump gets reelected in 2020, it'll be more damage than if he's removed in 2020. But there's no undoing the reality that we now know you can weaponize all of the worst instincts and ideas and sympathies of the American right. And conservatives are to blame for most of it, but the Democratic Party is not innocent here. And it's really important that we not forget that. I hope you're listening carefully and realize I'm not doing the both sides are the same. I'm not doing both sides are equally to blame, because they're not. But the Democratic establishment is not innocent in the rise of Trump. If you look at their behavior over the last 20 to 30 years, the circumstances that led to Trump are many, and Democrats have a piece of that responsibility. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I'm missing, and make sure to subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the podcast to support the work that we do. A lot of behind the scenes pictures from my trip to Los Angeles last week, which included an appearance on the Joe Rogan program. Follow the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show, and follow me while you're there at david.pakman. If you love learning new things, you probably want to check this out. The David Pakman Show today is sponsored by Skillshare, and we're giving you 2 entire months of free access to Skillshare when you click the link underneath this video. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community offering more than 25,000 video classes on just about anything you can think of. Get better at playing an instrument. Learn to use Photoshop. How to edit videos. They have classes on drawing, painting, business, cooking, nutrition, personal productivity, and I'm not even really scratching the surface. I recently took a great class on introductory watercolor painting. I'm still not good, but I am learning, and you can access the entire library of fun, easy to use online courses for free for 2 months by using the link underneath this video. 2 months of learning something that's totally new to you, something you want to get better at, something you already love, or you can get ahead in your career by learning new skills that will help you at your job. I've gotten a ton out of it. Pat has taken some courses that he's found really valuable, and I think you'll love it too. Get started for free by clicking the link under this video.